So, hi everyone, I'm Andrew Shaw. I am a software engineering fellow this summer with the digital services team in the city of Baltimore. And I'm an undergrad at the University of Washington studying computer science and philosophy.
And hi everyone, I'm Yiran. I'm a PhD student at Syracuse University, and I am a data analysis fellow this summer for the city of Baltimore.
And our presentation is about building an integrated mapping platform for the Office of Emergency Management here in Baltimore. So just wanted to go over a quick list of achievements and a kind of roadmap for the rest of the presentation. So here are the list of things that we were able to achieve throughout the summer. The first was we created a data inventory to help OEM, or the Office of Emergency Management, kind of catalog their available data sources and the list of dashboards that they commonly use. The second thing that we did was we branched out into the community and really tapped into community building by leveraging tech talent present in Baltimore and engaging with a bunch of software engineers and other STEM professionals via organizing a data hack night. And the last achievement that we did was we created a custom application and a new kind of integrated dashboard for OEM to visualize and unify these previously disparate sources of data into one central location. So first, just some quick background on the Office of Emergency Management. So OEM coordinates interagency emergency response operations in Baltimore. And so what that entails is that they don't actually conduct the emergency response operations themselves typically, but rather they coordinate the personnel and equipment between various different agencies. They're also in charge of sending public emergency notifications to keep Baltimore residents safe and informed. So we visited the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, which is a physical location in Baltimore at the start of our fellowship, to kind of look at how OEM's workflow work and discuss with them to scope out different needs and priorities that they had. So a little bit more on that discussion and the discussions that we continue to have with OEM. The problem we found was that OEM really has trouble finding and organizing data during emergencies. So on the right there, you can see just an example of some of the many dashboards that they might use during any particular emergency. And so they would have to pull up all of these dashboards at once. And you can imagine how hectic and chaotic that would be. So another problem that they have is that because they have so many dashboards, the data sets might be conflicting with each other, or some data sets might be out of date. Another problem that stems from that is that dashboards are oftentimes created by different agencies for specific emergencies, and these dashboards could be useful for future emergencies, but then get lost in this vast data landscape of all these dashboards. So they really have trouble kind of finding and organizing these in an efficient manner when they need to for emergencies. So overall, the lack of a unified data language really hinders stakeholder communication, which, if you remember, is really important for their mission and their objective of kind of coordinating that interagency response. So our goal, therefore, was to improve the ability for OEM to effectively use data during emergencies. So like I mentioned, our first project was to create a data inventory for OEM. So this inventory helped to track the most commonly used data sources, because previously we learned that OEM didn't really have a centralized repository of links to these dashboards or data sources. So they had to go searching through their Outlook or their emails to pull up the links every time they needed something. Another thing that we did in this data inventory is that we recorded metadata for each of the data sources. So things like update frequency, who's administrating these different data sources and the specific use cases that OEM might need these data sources for. I also went and I wrote some technical reviews that investigated the technical capabilities of some of these data sources, including, whether this data source was open source, whether it had an API, and if I knew the data pipeline behind it, so that we could overall just better understand the data landscape for when we built the actual application in the future.
So the second project I helped to do for the OEM was to host a hack night. It happened on a Wednesday at the end of June in person and online in Baltimore. So the goal to do this hack night is to actually find data sets relating to vulnerable populations in Baltimore and to build data automation or data pipelines for OEM. And actually another goal of this is to kind of gather insights from the community and kind of do a community building. So for the hack night, we wrote 3 sets of things. So before the hack night, Andrew and I, we wrote a list of data questions for the hack night participants to answer. And then during the hack night event, Andrew and I actually joined 2 different teams to try to answer some of the questions we generated. And then after the hack night, Andrew and I, we wrote a summary and a list of recommendations for OEM based on the answers those participants wrote to help OEM to better understand like what the community thought about this hack night and the solutions.
So now that we had the data inventory and the hack night completed, we then started the planning process for building that custom application. We considered multiple mapping solutions, including ArcGIS, MapLibre, and Mapbox. And we were initially leaning towards trying to use some kind of open source solution in the interest of transparency. But actually, we ultimately decided to end up using ArcGIS, which is an enterprise solution, because it was just better integrated with the city's existing infrastructure, as well as infrastructure that was commonly used by other governments at the federal level or other kind of state and local governments. Once we decided that, we then met with other city agencies like the Department of Public Works, the Department of Transportation, to discuss getting access to some of their data sources and to learn more about their data pipeline process, how they process data and got it from crews on the ground into things like ArcGIS. So then we jumped right into building a GIS Center, which is what we ended up calling this application. And so I learned how to use ArcGIS Experience Builder Developer Edition to develop custom widgets that could be used to create this application while still building on top of ArcGIS's existing resources. So one goal that we really had with this application was to maximize the flexibility and ease of maintenance post-deployment. And the way that we did this is we actually stored all of the map layer metadata in a separate database. And what this allows us to do is that if we need to, for example, modify a layer in the future or add additional data sources, we don't have to go into the actual application and modify the source code and hard code this information. But rather, we can just enter a new data entry into the database with the URL and some metadata about the layer. And that kind of increases that flexibility in maintenance. Another thing that we did was we utilized a lot of pre-built ArcGIS widget components, and we also utilized their authentication services. And that allowed us to really quickly build and scale this application in a way that I don't think would have been possible if we had maybe gone with some of those other solutions. So I think that really reaffirmed our decision to go with ArcGIS. And finally, obviously, this process was informed by the previous 2 projects that we had completed, the data inventory and the hack night, because we pulled the data sets from the data inventory, and then we also sourced new data sets and new insights that we gleaned from the hack night. So now I'm just going to show a quick example of what a typical workflow might look like on Baltimore OEM GIS Center. Okay. So you can see on the left there, we have the capability to add different sets of layers. And so you can see I'm here I'm adding the council districts layer, for example, which was one of the asks that OEM had. And clicking on that brings up more detailed information about the council member and their contact information. We can also look through different tabs and categories of layers. For example, here I'm adding the cooling centers layer from the infrastructure category tab. And we also included the capability for OEM to organize layers around scenarios, which are groups of layers that they can add to the map all at once. So here you can see me adding the vulnerable populations scenario. And this just includes information like hospitals and dialysis centers that might be relevant to certain vulnerable populations. We can do things like reorder the layers, toggle their visibility. We can add multiple scenarios to the map all at once. And then finally, we wanted to give OEM the ability to customize this. So we let them save new scenarios as well. And you can see that it will show up there on the left. Okay. So really quickly wrapping up, what are the impacts that this application had? Well, this is an actual quote actually from someone from the Office of Emergency Management who said that they were really impressed with the application and it was really easy to navigate and understand the data. We felt that we really met our goal to improve OEM's ability to efficiently find, compare, and visualize these spatial data sets during emergencies. And we did that not only by building the application, but also implementing broader data practices to source Baltimore-specific and more up-to-date data sets for OEM. And we've had other agencies also request us to share this application with them as well. So the next steps going forward are to first to create a transition plan to hand off this work to the rest of the digital services team. We want to capture the lessons that we learned by creating a new guide about how to use ArcGIS and also implement trainings and data best practices with the Office of Emergency Management. And finally, we'll continue to work with OEM to source data and improve the user experience based on continued usability testing with participants. So thank you for listening to our presentation. We're open to any questions now.
I just want to say this is a really cool project. It's an awesome product. It looks so cool and very useful for sure. I'm curious, I'm not sure if you mentioned this in the presentation. I was wondering how you chose vulnerable populations and things like that.
Yeah, that was informed by discussions with the Office of Emergency Management. They had specifically mentioned that they were having difficulty kind of targeting elderly populations specifically. So they gave us a list of map layers that they would like to see to better target recovery efforts towards especially elderly populations.
Interesting, thank you.
I see Shan is
yes. Hey, Andrew and Yuan, congratulations for the project. I love what you present. I think one thing I learned from working for the city of Houston for many years is really trying to understand the question. You guys, before deliver a solution, you go into have a hackathon moment. You really engage people to get those challenge out, to think about those questions. Once your question get clear, I think deliver solution is just so relatively easy. So I love your approach, and I just wondering, what's the most number one challenge you facing when you do the hackathon? Trying to get the the question they don't understand. Just particular moment you want to share with us.
Yeah, Yiran, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think the most challenging part, was to kind of like probe or fathom the understanding of the teams. So Andrew and I would roll like quite a few different versions of the questions, and after we got the answers from the participants, we actually had another follow-up meeting with the participants who were available to chat with us and to hear their feedback on the questions and what they thought could be done in the future. So I think we did an okay job for hosting the Hack Night.
Thanks for that question. I think they're about to close out the breakout rooms with us, so I probably won't do another question just because we'll probably get cut off.
Okay.
But thank you to the both of you. This was wonderful. Thanks for sharing this with us.